Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe P. Zapia. It is Mike Tagliere, and it's you. And today we're talking about breakouts. That's right. Who is going to separate themselves from the herd? Who is going to break away from the pack and be that impact player in fantasy football this year? And we're going to talk about the running back candidates for that and the quarterback candidates. And we're also going to get to your mailbag questions here. We put some questions out. We want to get the pulse of the people, what's going on, what's on your mind, and try to help you today. And of course, tags, we just came off the long holiday weekend. Want to thank everybody, all of our military service men and women. I know we didn't do a show on Memorial Day weekend, but for all your heroism, for all your sacrifice, for all that you do for us all the time, and for all the sacrifices that have been made in the past, I want to do a special shout out for all of those men and women in all of our armed services. You are incredibly brave. You're incredible human beings, and we thank you for your service and tags. It was a long weekend here where it rained basically for 3 days. Nothing really doing. Yesterday was finally nice. Did get outside. How about you? Did you get on that Forrest Gump tractor trailer of yours and go cut that grass? What'd you do this weekend?
Oh, man, there was a barbecue. We definitely did with some friends. It was a good time. We were putting off, my wife wanted a screened-in porch, like a deck area, and so we went to extend on the regular deck, and we actually put in 3 posts, and then the building inspector was driving down our country road and saw us and said, "Hey, knock it off." And so basically, I kid you not, and he said basically we had to go apply for a permit. I didn't realize I needed a permit out in the middle of nowhere.
Everything needs a permit. Everything.
Yes, it does. I've learned that, so it's a learning experience. But we started doing the screen into deck. But yeah, outside of that, it was a good weekend, and I definitely appreciate the words you said about Memorial Day. It's we're thankful for everything that anybody that's served. Obviously, we just want to thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think you spend too much time with Yates there about this deck for the last couple of weeks, and now you're doing a porch. Don't let him influence you. You can't do this. I can't have two of you wrapped up in all these like home projects and these open spaces. And,
hey, don't worry. Work comes first here. Work
comes
first, and then the deck comes after work.
You know what? I'm sure he's going to use that excuse of why he lost to me in Fantasy Feud last week. And if you missed that, go check it out on demand, of course.
That's exactly why.
Yeah, that's it. He was just distracted from all the deck building. Yes. That's the problem. Well, we're going to build a deck here, and we're going to put a lot of talent on top of it, but it all starts with bringing in good talent to talk about that, and that means Chris Meaney from Fade the Noise. Chris Meaney, head of content at FTN. Chris Meaney of the Fantasy Black Book series. Meaney's riding high because his Montreal Canadiens have advanced into the playoffs. You're very, very happy about this. Yes, Chris Meaney.
Man, you guys have me in stitches before we even got on here. It's just like great vibes. Just pleased that I'm able to join you guys after ditching you, a few days ago.
It's true.
Tags is talking about being on the ride on, and I've been doing a little bit of that myself here on the East Coast lately. But yes, I think what you said off the top of the show, I just want to hammer that home again as well. It was really well said, and thanks to everybody out there who has served, and thanks to you guys for having me on the show. It should be fun.
All right, before we kick things off here with the running backs and quarterback breakout candidates, I want to remind everybody the time for Calvin Ridley jersey has passed, but that's okay, because we got another big-time wide receiver jersey giveaway to happen here thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. It is Stefon Diggs. Can you dig it? We got Stefon Diggs autographed jersey. All you got to do is go to fantasypros.com/contest. You do a quick review over on Apple Podcasts or CastBox. You screenshot that. You go to fantasypros.com/contest. You upload that. And just like that, you are uploaded and entered to win this new Stefon Diggs jersey and any other giveaway that we do here at Fantasy Pros. So you listen to the show, go get some free swag just for listening, just for hanging out. Doesn't get much better than that. So you are the guest, Meaney. Let's start with running backs and you, and give me your first running back candidate who's ready to break out this year. And I know that everybody's got a different determination of what's a breakout and who broke out and what does that mean. You can give us your take on that too, because all that matters is your take on it, and that's all that matters. So go ahead.
Well, there is one guy that I think we could have that conversation with in a little bit. If he doesn't get brought up, I'll say it. But the one guy for me is J.K. Dobbins, and I think there was a little bit of uncertainty last year heading into draft with Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards, and knowing Lamar Jackson carries the ball and calls his own number so much, especially inside the red zone. And I think the feeling was, okay, if you draft J.K. Dobbins, maybe he's a league winner towards the end of the season, and I think that's exactly what he was. You got to remember, Mark Ingram was taken around the 5th, 6th round last year, and it's it's valuable to have a lead dog here in this offense. So there's still some concerns, but let's just talk about the good here first with Dobbins. I mean, from week 8 on, after the week 7 bye for Baltimore, he averaged 12 carries per game, 73 rushing yards per game, double-digit carries in 8 of his final 9 games of the regular season, 7 TDs over that span. How about snaps? Never more than 43% over the first 6 weeks of the season, above 43% in 8 of his final 9 games, including over 50 in both playoff games. Now, the concerns, Gus Edwards is still there. Mark Ingram's not around anymore. Edwards is going to remain a factor. He just is. But Dobbins was still an RB1 down the stretch, 28 fantasy points in week 17 with the season on the line. From week 13 to 17, he was RB6 in a half-point setting. I don't feel like he needs a lot of touches to be successful inside this offense. And the other concerns, the catches. I mean, this is a guy who had 11 grabs in his first 6 games. I'm thinking, okay, all right, maybe he's going to catch 20-plus balls here, but just 7 over his final 9 games. But he still had 4 catches in the 2 playoff games. The routes ran heavily in favor of him compared to Edwards, like 78 for Edwards, 191 for Dobbins. I'm not saying he can't catch, but that is one concern that I have. But just an explosive running back, right? 8 runs of at least 20 yards. Only Henry and Chubb had more. At the same time, Lamar and Gus also had 8. But it's a team that likes to run the football. And like I said, it's valuable to have, I think, a potential lead dog here in the offense. So also efficient inside the red zone. Inside the 5, scored 7 of his 8 opportunities. So I think he's a guy that I feel like he could break up to be a top 10 RB this year.
Well, I know J.K. Dobbins was on my list too, so before I throw it to Tags, I'll just throw my 2 cents in and then let him run with it, because the consistency towards the end of the year, what you saw out of him that to me was so important, is that weekly floor, and then he had a little ceiling because, as you mentioned, those breakaway runs for those touchdowns, and he had so many touchdowns every week. There was a touchdown every week. There was a touchdown, and that to me, that carries you through that end of that push of the regular season into the playoffs. It was a fantastic run for him. And if there's any incremental improvement in the passing game year over year for Baltimore, that's a good thing. And I think Gus Edwards being there, although he's going to take some carries away, it's also going to keep Dobbins fresher. And I think that that's clearly where most teams are going in the NFL, especially run-heavy attacks. And I don't know if that's a bad thing when we've added in this last game here, this 17th game to the season. And people say, well, it's only 1 game. Well, you know what? It's a whole more than 1 game. It is a lot more contact. It's another, 20-plus carries or potentially touches or even more for J.K. Dobbins to really have to stand up to. And I think monitoring that a little bit and having somebody to take the pressure off him is a good thing for sure. Now, Tags, I think Dobbins was on your list as well, if I'm correct. Yeah, so take me through your thoughts here. Chris has some great stats here, but why is he on your list?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to talk in circles when I talk about Dobbins, and I say that because, we talk about the Titans' offense last year. We've talked about it in the last year and a half with Tannehill under center and say, efficiency can't keep up. It can't do this. It can't do that. And then they continually did it week over week. The Ravens' offense has reached that level for me when it comes to running back production. You go back to Mark Ingram in 2019. The man, I think he carried the ball just over 200 times that year, but he scored 15 total touchdowns. Mark Ingram has never been like an elite talent. He's been a very, very good running back in the NFL, where if that guy can score 15 touchdowns in this offense, you have to think about the possibilities for someone like J.K. Dobbins, who's electric, who can become one of those elite running backs in the NFL. The reason that I can't draft him higher than like a high-end RB2 is because of the lack of involvement in the passing game. He only saw, I think, 24 targets last year. So even this year, when I went to do projections, I sat down, I gave him 42 targets, and I felt like I was being, I don't want to say like, I was trying to give him a little bump because I want to like him more because he does have that playmaking ability. But at the same time, they added more receiving options. So I don't know how much of a bump he's going to get in the receiving department. So when you look at 42 targets, it's like a Josh Jacobs territory where it's like, okay, that's not great. He needs to score a ton of touchdowns. Is that possible? We've already talked about it with Mark Ingram. We talked about last year how these running backs combined for over 15 touchdowns in this backfield. Gus Edwards is not going away. Lamar Jackson has rushed for 2,200 yards the last 2 years, but only scored 14 rushing touchdowns. I know that may seem like only 14. I'm telling you, Lamar Jackson, in terms of what he's rushed for, he should have over 20 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. So does that number bump up? Does Gus Edwards steal some of those carries? I like J.K. Dobbins. I think that he is going to be well worth an RB2. I think he has RB1 upside. I just don't want to bake that into his price this year. So yes, I love getting him as an RB2 with a player that does present top 10 upside. But the question is, guys, what do you think his actual ceiling is? Like, let's say best case scenario, he gets those touchdowns, he gets most of the carries, but he doesn't get a lot of work in the passing game. How much does that limit his upside?
Meaney, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. That's the biggest concern that I have is the catches. Is he going to be able to? I mean, 42 targets is probably. You're right. It's probably the ceiling.
Yeah.
Right. At like best case, it's to be conservative. I'd say maybe even like this to catch 30 balls would be a win. I think for him. So yeah, that's my concern as well. Is from a full point PPR standpoint, he probably doesn't have that upside to be a top 10 RB. I mean, he would need to find the end zone, like Joe alluded to earlier, just how, it seemed like every single game he was at least finding the end zone and, finishing as a top 10 RB because he is getting touchdowns. But it's hard to really just predict those and project them. But I think also tags what you said with Mark Ingram here. I mean, Mark Ingram, a lot of people have taken shots at this guy over the past couple of years and not being, an explosive back and not being all that skilled of a running back. But again, inside this offense and just what they do and running around and now getting some pass catchers there because nobody had fewer passing yards, no receivers had fewer. Like, it was the receiving core was dead last in the NFL. So maybe they can open up the field a little bit and that will create some more runs. But yeah, in a full point PPR setting, it does seem a little bit unrealistic for him to be a top 12 running back. But I think even still, there's room to grow, I think, as a pass catcher. Just the fact that we know that Gus Edwards is not going to be on the field too much in third downs. And they're kind of tipping when I see him on the field third downs, it's almost like they're tipping their hands. Like, everyone knows you're not dumping it off to Gus Edwards. So maybe, another year with the team. This is going to be kind of a theme for me here, talking about sophomore backs. But last year was a little weird. No full training camps and stuff for certain rookies. So, a year here with the team, training camps, maybe that's something where he could grow.
I think for me, looking right now on FantasyPros, he's RB16 in ECR. I think what's the upside? Probably 8 or 9 at most. Like, he's not cracking top 5 or anything like that because of the workload and because of the skill set probably. But even so, if you can get a guy at 16 RB and get him somewhere in that even just RB1, low-end RB1 conversation, that's good ROI. That's a good investment on a player who, once again, looked really good last year. All right, Meaney, take us through your second guy on your running back breakout list.
So does Cam Akers count? This is a question I want
to bring up. He counts
because
he's on my list too, so this is great. I love that we all did these lists separately and we came here together and then we all have the same guys. And that tells you something for those people listening. It tells you all these people are here doing all this work, doing all this research for you guys. We all kind of see the same potential. I know why I like Cam Akers. Tell me why you do.
Yeah, I mean, one is opportunity. It took some time for him to get that opportunity. Almost like, the same kind of thing I said about J.K. Dobbins. Maybe he could be a league winner. Well, I had a lot of Akers, and I won consolation brackets. Like, unfortunately, he wasn't doing anything until it was too late. He had to deal with Darrell Henderson, who's still going to be around. Malcolm Brown is gone. He also had rib injuries, and he had to deal with, Sean McVay only giving him a handful of touches and opportunities. But 21 touches and 16 fantasy points, those were his averages over the final 7 games, including the postseason. He just had massive postseason showings. I mean, 28 for 131 and a touch, 18 for 90 and a touchdown. The game, week 14, was really his coming out party. I think it was a Thursday night football game.
Thursday night against the Patriots.
Against your Patriots, yeah. 171 yards roughly. It's just about opportunity. And also, how about, you can't overestimate what Matthew Stafford is going to do to this offense. You bring in a veteran quarterback who can stretch the field, down the field, throw some balls with accuracy. And that's going to open up things a little bit for Cam Akers as well. I think Henderson's going to play a third down role. He was pretty productive early on in the season, and that was part of it. I think what took so long for Cam to get some opportunities. But, Akers caught some balls down the stretch here in, the last 3 weeks. There's a guy who had 7 targets. He reeled them all in. So he could be a potential 3-down guy. And, I'm not breaking any news here. This guy's going to get drafted in, as a top 10 running back. But I think it's fair. I think he does, as opposed to Dobbins, I think he does have upside to be a top 5 RB.
Well, you've seen that in the McVay offense. We saw it with Todd Gurley 2 years in a row where he was the number 1 overall player in fantasy. Now, I don't know if he's going to be Todd Gurley. That's a lofty expectation, but everything you're saying about Cam Akers, I'm all in on as well. And no, you're not getting a huge discount on him, but in terms of the breakout and the good return on investment, you're drafting him basically as a low-end RB1. Some teams are going to have him as their second RB, and I'll tell you what, you have him as your second RB on your team, that is a great look, because I do think just the injuries really kind of held him back early on and held back his progression as the season went on, and eventually you did see it. And in that game you mentioned specifically, that game you saw everything. You saw him catch the ball, you saw him block, you saw him run guys over, run inside, run outside, you saw him score touchdowns, you saw him protect the football. Everything you could possibly look for, you saw. And that to me was very eye-opening, where I said, okay, this guy is ready for the workload, and next year I'm going to have all kinds of shares of Cam Akers. Tags, who's a second running back for you on your list in terms of breakouts?
I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I've talked about him so much on the show, but Najee Harris is going to break out.
Well, we got 2 more months to go before we even get to the draft season, so it's going to be a lot of Najee Harris, but that's okay.
No, we talked enough about him. You guys have heard all about it, but I want to just add to the fact that I've done my new strength of schedule piece that's going to be coming out this week, and I go through it and I talk about a different way to view strength of schedule, because the way everybody does it is they look at total points scored against a team last year and then they apply that to this year. It doesn't really work out that well. I break it down to an individual game standpoint and what they allowed consistency-wise to running backs, and then apply that to the new schedule. So Najee Harris, one of the best. He actually has the second best schedule in the NFL for running backs. He starts out against the Bills, the Raiders, the Bengals, and the Packers. I mean, he should get off to a hot start. We've heard about him lining up at wide receiver. There's really no reason to dislike Najee Harris, especially where analysts have him ranked right now. You know, you just mentioned Cam Akers. I would take Najee Harris over Cam Akers.
There you go.
I agree. I would too. Yeah, I don't have much to add, but I mean, we just have a few years now of a sample size of running backs inside that offense. Yeah. Really, really productive. I mean, say what you want about Bell, but even D'Angelo Williams came in the 1 year. James Conner when he was healthy too. It looked like they addressed the offensive line a little bit there. So yeah, you can't say too many. There's not too many backs that you can say are going to have 300 touches. I think he's one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, Cam Akers right now, ECR 11, Najee Harris, ECR 14. So they're going very close already. So if you want to reach for Harris over Akers, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. In fact, I kind of lean that way as well myself in my rankings. Before we move on to the next running back, I want to take a moment here and thank one of the sponsors of today's show, because what do Rihanna, James Harden, and John Hamm all have in common? Well, they're just like Joe Pisapia, and they wear Rain sunglasses. That's right. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see my cool Rain sunglasses. They are amazing. Absolutely, honestly, the best sunglasses I've ever had in my entire life. And that's why GQ named them the 2021 best sunglasses for men, and even Tags likes them too. So they're good for boys also. Now, there's no risk, even when you get free shipping, free returns, 1-year warranty. What do you have to lose? Nothing. Rain was founded back in 2009 by 3 California guys frustrated by the lack of quality eyewear at accessible prices. And that's true. You want, $500 sunglasses? No, that's not practical. But the $10 ones, they break all the time. So they set off on a sunglasses journey focusing on using premium materials and creating super lightweight, carefully crafted sunglasses. So look no further than Rain. Again, these beautiful sunglasses right here make me look even cooler than I am, which is hard because I'm already pretty darn cool. But if you go to FantasyPros, obviously you know quite a bit about our content here, and so high quality is the content here, just like the content of these sunglasses. So right now, Rain has an exclusive offer for you, our listeners. Head to Rain, again, that's RAEN.com, RAEN.com. Use the promo code FantasyPros and get 25% off your first order. That's Rain, RAEN.com, and use that promo code FantasyPros for 25% off of your first order, and look like me and John Hamm, who I often get mistaken for, guys. I don't know if you realize that.
No.
On the street, they go, "Hey, is that John Hamm?" And I'm like, "No, no, it's me. It's Joe Pisapia." All right, Meaney, knock me out here. I'm gonna put my shades on again just to make sure that I don't get too much, brightness from all the breakouts that you got. Give me your third breakout running back. I want to have some protection here with all this nice UV protection I've got.
Sold. Yeah, you got me. I'm heading over there, and I'm gonna buy a pair, a couple of pairs. There's two backs I want to have conversations with. Maybe I'll bring one up later and just get your guys' thoughts. I'm going to talk about CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Everyone was just all about this guy last year. First pick in dynasty leagues, rookie-only drafts. And it looked like he was going to be unbelievable to start the season. Averaged 21 touches, 16 fantasy points in his first 6 games. Then they brought in Lev Bell. There was some injury concerns. I know there was a couple games that stand out to me where he had all the opportunities to get in from the 1, the 2, the 5, getting lit up by J.J. Watt, just not getting in at all in the red zone. But maybe we're just a little too early on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We still have an Andy Reid offense. We still have an explosive offense. I know that they brought in Jerick McKinnon and Darrell Williams is going to be catching balls into the backfield. That is a slight concern that I have. And he likely won't average 20 touches per game that he did before Bell was brought in. But like I said, man, this is an explosive offense. This is a guy who doesn't need a ton of touches to be a borderline RB1, and that's all we're really asking for him to be an RB1 here. He's not getting drafted as a top 12 running back. He's slipping to like the late teens here. So if he's your RB2, I think that he's perfectly fine. For a guy, I look at Kamara a couple years ago in the Saints offense when Ingram was part of it. I look at Eckler a couple years ago with Melvin Gordon as somebody that just had, 12 to 15 touches and productive with those touches. So year 2 in the Reid offense, a year too early. Don't sleep on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he can break out and have a decent season.
I know Tags loves CEH as well. And I love that all these guys we're talking about are all kind of on this fringe precipice. Like they're all kind of mid to high RB2s, and you just feel like if you hit right there, and I guess this kind of says something too, Tags, about if you are in a full point PPR and you do go wide receiver first towards the end, if you take a Diggs or you take a Devontae Adams or somebody like that in that first round, there's a fair amount of this talent here that you could feel like, well, I can still get a pretty darn good running back with some of the guys that we're discussing today, which I think is not always the case every season. This is a unique year where there's a lot of value, a lot of guys at the right age and the right point in their career with potential and upside, but still some floor. Who is your third breakout running back, Tags?
It's Edwards-Helaire. So when you go with the 3 different when you look at running backs that have potential top 5 upside, what do you need? You need a guy who's going to see probably 70 plus targets. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there. He can get that. You look for a guy that's part of a high scoring offense because he needs to get into the end zone quite a few times. He has that. You need a guy that's trusted. They drafted him at the end of the first round. Again, I don't think that they wanted to give up on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think it was last year they were looking to provide someone a little bit relief. When they brought in Le'Veon Bell, it was more like he became available. Why the heck not? I don't think they were actively searching, but it was more like, hey, if we can add another running back, and we all know that turned out terribly. Like Le'Veon Bell is just not the same running back without that Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line he played behind back then. So you look at Edwards-Helaire, you look at the competition. Darrell Williams is a fine running back. He's not even Gus Edwards. So what are we really worried about with him? He's fine. But he's the clear number 2. So we have the workhorse running back who's going to get all those targets. And as Chris mentioned, the first 6 games of the season, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the RB11 in fantasy football. Now, again,
and
he
was
getting a lot of touches.
PPR scoring, Mike,
it's half PPR.
Half PPR tax. Okay.
And so he scored 1 touchdown during that time. If he had scored just 1 more touchdown in those 6 games, he would have been the RB5 during that time. So it goes to show you just how much touchdowns can matter to a running back in these offenses. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, I can't believe he's falling as far as he is. If you want to tell me don't draft him as an RB1, I'm fine with that because I understand the downside in terms of what you saw last year, but they didn't bring in anybody that I'm scared about. I'm still not. I still like Edwards-Helaire. He popped off as RB11 in my projections, and again, that's being modest with him scoring just 7.5 rushing touchdowns is what I put him down for. And I think it was 3 receiving touchdowns. So Edwards-Helaire, I love the call, and I think it's a great post-hype sleeper because people are down on him just because of where they drafted him last year. But if you're getting him as let's say if you do get him as your RB1 in the 3rd round or 4th round, sign me up because your wide receivers are going to be stacked.
I'm also thinking, too, in Superflex leagues, we start to look at what ADP looks like. When a couple of the big quarterbacks go, if you do take a Josh Allen or a Mahomes early or somebody like that, look at all these running backs. You could probably go Mahomes, with a top 5 overall pick, get an elite wide receiver, and then maybe you get 1, possibly 2 of the running backs we're talking about because we all know in Superflex, sometimes the ADP of the other guys kind of get suppressed again 1 round, and all of a sudden you can look back and say, you can really make that case for going early quarterback because of the running back depth this year of those guys that are able to maybe make that jump and go from RB2s to RB1s. For me, I'm going to talk about Antonio Gibson. Had a fantastic finish to the year last year. And I understand they brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick and they're going to want to throw the ball downfield. And I get that, and they should. Last year, the quarterback play was atrocious, and that's putting it mildly for the Washington football team. And yes, Fitzpatrick is going to be able to do that, and they brought in Samuel, and they certainly drafted De'Ami Brown. They have a lot of tools now here for Ryan Fitzpatrick to go in there and be a successful influence on that passing game. But I think his presence hurts J.D. McKissick's role in the offense more than it hurts Gibson's. McKissick was that big dump-off guy. You'd see him sometimes, Alex Smith would dump the ball off 10, 11 times to him in a game. And I think when you look at Antonio Gibson, a guy who's got good hands, a guy who is trying to get his feet wet in the NFL, as Meaney mentioned before, these guys didn't have the full regular normal offseason, the preseason games. You saw as the season went on, this guy get more and more comfortable. And let's not forget, he is still relatively new to the position compared to a lot of other guys. So I think all of those things under consideration, he doesn't have the same wear and tear as some other running backs, which I also find very intriguing because he was a converted wide receiver. And I think that is also fascinating to think about as well. So Gibson, for me, hits that list. Meaney, let's talk about your quarterbacks and switch gears here. Give me your 2 breakout quarterbacks. We'll talk about them in pairs, if you will, that you think are going to have really big seasons in 2021.
So one I'm confident in, and one I'll be honest, I'm not totally. Let's start with the guy. Let's start with the guy that I am confident in. It's Jalen Hurts, right? Just monster fantasy games last season when he started the last 4, 19, 37, 18, and 16 to finish up. You got to remember he was pulled in that 4th game as well, with the Eagles just being the Eagles and giving away the game. But he was good when he played. He averaged 68 rushing yards per game over those final 4 games, 3 rushing touchdowns. I know this is crazy to talk about, and it's not going to happen, but on pace, like if you put that on pace over a 17-game season, that's over 1,100 rushing yards. Not likely, but still, he's going to come with that rushing floor. I think he can improve as a passer as well. There was really nobody that he was throwing the football to. Obviously, you bring in Devontae Smith, who he has thrown footballs to before in college, and touchdowns. Jalen Reagor going to play in the slot. I think that's good for him. The offensive line is healthy too. You got to remember, last year they had 11 different combinations on the offensive line in their first 11 games. They started the season without Andre Dillard, without Brandon Brooks. Those guys are healthy. Lane Johnson was in and out. They draft Landon Dickerson. So I think this line can go back to being a top 5 line, is what we've seen in football from them over the past few years. It is getting a little bit older. They needed that Dickerson pick to make them a little bit younger, but it's still, in my opinion, we'll say top 10, and that's still fine. So he's going to give a nice little rushing floor there and improve as a passer, I think. And even in those couple games that he was playing under center, I mean, 338 passing yards and 3 touchdowns against Arizona, a team that needed W's towards the end of the season. They played the Cowboys at the end. The defense in Dallas wasn't great, but it improved towards the end. And they also needed a win there at the end of the season. He threw for 342 yards and 205 rushing yards in parts of 5 games. So it's really the floor that you're going to get with Jalen Hurts, and which you can't say about some quarterbacks, like Stafford, like Brady, but if they don't throw 2 or 3 touchdowns, they could give you single-digit fantasy showings. With Hurts, if he just has 1 touchdown game, he could end up with 20-plus fantasy points because we've already seen it. So that's the one guy that I like, and the other one here is a bit of a stretch, but I think he could break out because he doesn't have to do too much to have his best season of all time, and it's Sam Darnold.
Hey, he's on my list too. There you go.
Good. It makes me feel better when you guys are feeling
safety in numbers, my friend.
Things that
Safety in numbers.
59 completion percentage for his career, 213 passing yards per game, 6.6 yards per attempt. Like, these are his best numbers, right? 45 touchdowns, 39 picks. Teddy Bridgewater had arguably his best season under Matt Rule and Joe Brady. This is going to be year 2 for those guys. I'm sure they learned a thing or two, maybe to practice the red zone plays inside their practices, which Bridgewater called them out for. But they're surrounded by weapons. He's out of New York, which is great for anybody. The Jets get away from Adam Gase, of course, but DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, CMC, Terrace Marshall. Like, he could have a career season, and I'm not saying he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, but this guy's going outside the top 20. I think he's a great number 2 for Superflex. Heck, you could probably get him as your 3rd QB, and you find yourself rolling him out as your 2nd quarterback. I think this move is going to be really good for Sam Darnold.
If you are going to get a 3rd quarterback, you can get Darnold somehow, that's great. Or if somehow you missed out on the elite quarterbacks and then you're trying to just do it with bodies and get some sort of matchup play going on there, I love taking a shot on Darnold. I'll go with him first as mine because he's on my list. And going from Adam Gase calling plays to Joe Brady calling plays is such night and day. You're going to a team that has the best running back in football, arguably, to no running game at all last year. You're the night and day of all this, and then you're taking away the pressure, I think, of New York too. And there was so much pressure on him being that high pick. And I think he could have lived up to the pressure, but not under the circumstances he was put in, which is just terrible in terms of personnel, terrible in terms of coaching, terrible in terms of playbook. Everything that could go wrong went wrong for Darnold. And he is not Ryan Tannehill. Very different personalities. So everybody just shouldn't look and say, well, Ryan Tannehill, nah, he's a fiery, crazy kind of guy. Ryan Tannehill, I love Tannehill. Darnold's a little bit more reserved, calm, cool, collected. But I think getting him into Carolina is a great opportunity, great weapons. And again, he can just get back to the basics, and giving him this full offseason there is going to be huge. I love that. And the other one for me is, you might laugh, but it's Joe Burrow. And you'll say, well, he kind of broke out. Well, he really didn't. He didn't play a full season. He had some inconsistencies at times in the starts. And I love Joe Burrow. And I know Tags does too. He and I were both very bullish on him. We thought he would finish as a potential QB1 last year. And you saw some of those little moments there where you go, oh, I get really excited. Now you're adding Jamar Chase's favorite toy back into the fold. I wish they did a little bit more for the O-line. They did some. I'd like to see some more. That defense is still terrible. Joe Burrow's set up for success in fantasy this year, and I think he is going to open a lot of eyes where everybody's talking about Herbert, everybody's talking about Trevor Lawrence, everybody's talking about all these other guys, and they're forgetting a little bit about Joe Burrow, and I think he's going to remind everybody. Tags, who are your two breakout QBs?
Jalen Hurts is definitely one of them. Hurts, and it's funny because Yates, I'm going to throw him under the bus here a little bit, but I'm only doing it, Yates, because I love you. So the reason I'm doing it is because he posted on Twitter, he was basically mocking where people were drafting Jalen Hurts, and I don't think he should be mocking them, because the reason is, it's the same reason he liked Cam Newton last year. It's the same reason Cam Newton was a good fantasy quarterback for a long time. He doesn't have to be an accurate passer. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is going to complete 52% of his passes again this year. That should take a step forward with better options around him. They have given him some more weapons there. It's a new coaching staff. There's a lot of things that have changed, but when you look at potential breakout quarterbacks, you have to find a quarterback with mobility, because otherwise everybody kind of knows what they're getting. It's almost like the Phillip Rivers effect, the Ben Roethlisberger effect, the guys that Matt Ryan is in that territory now, where it's like these guys have no rushing upside, so you need them to throw for 40 touchdowns, otherwise they're not sniffing the top 6 quarterbacks. When I'm thinking breakout, I'm thinking a guy that has massive upside. Jalen Hurts fits that role. Is he going to work out? I don't know, but where you're drafting him as like the 8th quarterback off the board, it's not going to make or break your roster. You know, you draft him, you move on. There's going to be other quarterbacks on the waiver wire. So he was definitely one of them. The other one's Trevor Lawrence. And Trevor Lawrence, for a lot of the reasons that we like Joe Burrow last year, you know, you have the recipe for success here. You have a quarterback who's coming in pro ready. And Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect than Joe Burrow was considered, because he did it for a longer time. Joe Burrow, if you just took his 2019 season, probably one of the best quarterbacks of all time in college. But again, Lawrence has done this a long time. He's coming in pro ready. We know that. His mobility is better than Burrow's was. You know, yes. Trevor Lawrence should rush for 400 plus yards, a handful of touchdowns, maybe 5-6 touchdowns. I could see that, like a Josh Allen type production on the ground to start his career. That is what you need to get into that territory. The only thing that can hold back Trevor Lawrence is Urban Meyer. That's where I'm at.
Well, and that's not impossible.
It's very true. I have little faith in that man, but it could be like an Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy situation, where basically McCarthy was put up on a pedestal for so long as a good coach, when in reality he wasn't. He was never a good coach. Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers carried him a long time, and I think we saw that last year. Even when Prescott got hurt, that team wasn't even competitive. So Trevor Lawrence, top 12 potential in year one.
Very cool. All right, before we get down to the mailbag and get out of here, I want to also recognize another sponsor of today's show, IPVanish, which is a virtual private network, a VPN for short. And it's super important. It helps you safely browse the internet from home or wherever you are. You can use VPNs for your computers, your tablets, your phones, even things like a Fire Stick when you're streaming media. And what you can do is use that VPN and basically keep all of your data encrypted. So what we have here with IPVanish is very important, because what you're doing on the internet is no one else's business but yours. So IPVanish helps you remain anonymous and secure on the internet. And for listeners of the show, IPVanish is offering an incredible 65% off. That's just $3.49 for the first month of $31.49 for the year. And here's everything you get with IPVanish: an anonymous IP address. You get circumvent any online censorship, get protection when using public Wi-Fi, And remember, when IP vanish, all your data is encrypted, so no matter what, no one can snoop on what you're doing, and 24/7, support. So you can email them, chat with them, even call them, and they're there to help. So go to ipvanish.com/pros to claim your 65% off savings. Again, that's ipvanish.com/pros. Plan starting at $349 all the way to $31.49 a year. It's time to sign up and get that 65% off now. Let's get to some mailbag and answer the people's questions. So, Tags, give me a quick answer on this one. Who's the dark horse candidate to you that you stand behind 100%, no matter what, that's going to give a big ROI at their respective position this year? And that's from Travis Sumner over on the Twitter machine. What do you got?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire fits that role for me.
Okay.
Where he's being drafted. Absolutely.
All right, let's go to Stick Stomper here for Meaney. Meaney, you play hockey, so you're familiar with sticks and stuff. Do you think that McVay wants Cam Akers to fill the workhorse role that he had in Gurley, or do you expect him to be committed to splitting the work? I know we talked quite a bit about Cam Akers already. Do you see any possibility that he becomes that Gurley role, or do you think it is, at the best case scenario, Henderson's still there a little bit, but Cam Akers is the lion's share of the touches?
No, I think he can be similar to Gurley. It may not be like a 5 or 6 catch kind of production that Gurley had those 2 awesome years that he had. But again, yeah, I don't need to spend too much time here. But this is a guy who was getting 20-plus touches over the last few weeks of the season when it mattered. So I think McVay saw that, and I think he's headed for like an average of at least 20 touches. And I think that's close to what Gurley got.
All right, this one's from Ryan Turley at Ryan Turley0. Buying or selling Mike Davis as a top 12 back this year? Tags, any thoughts on Mike Davis and his enormous quads?
I think Mike Davis is a tremendous value. I'm viewing him like I viewed David Montgomery last year, as like a low-end RB2 that you're not going to win your fantasy league because of him, but you're not going to lose it either. He's someone you could plug and play. RB1, absolutely not. All
right, last one here. We'll try to get this one in, squeeze it in. Felix Borawakak? I don't know. Okay, Bubba Felix. That's an easier thing for me to say. I'm sorry, Felix, if I butchered your name. Barowiak. Felix Barowiak. I fixed it. There you go. You're welcome, Felix. Okay, Bubba Felix. With injuries over the last few years, Chris Meaney, is Saquon still a top 5 worthy pick?
Ooh, yes.
All right.
I'll lean yes.
You'll lean yes. Tags, are you leaning yes or no on that one?
Yeah, I say yes. I mean, he's right there. Ezekiel Elliott is being undervalued in terms of like.
Agreed.
I think Zeke's the safer pick because it just. I think about the offenses that they're in and like the projections, how easy we have it, and I think it's probably. Even just talking through this right now, sometimes it helps. Where it's like I'm in therapy right now, and
this is a safe space. Tags.
It is, and I will say the safe space is Ezekiel Elliott. Is that Zeke should probably be like the number 3 pick in drafts, if I'm being completely honest. Just because every year the dude is finished as a top 5 running back, like in terms of points per game, and then unless you remove Dak Prescott, which
yeah, but he's had huge workloads over these years, and everyone's talking about the Derrick Henry workloads catching up to him, and Zeke's got more miles on him than Henry even. So I know not in a shorter period, but still, it's a lot there. So I understand the concern. There's no concern for us here with Chris Meaney, except of how good he could potentially be. He is broken out years ago. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Meaney. Again, he's the head of content at FTN, Fade the Noise, head of fantasy there. He does all the stuff with the FTN bets, FTN Daily. He's a writer, producer. I mean, he's everything there. Meaney, what's going on, brother? Anything else going on that's fun and exciting in the world of FTN you want to plug?
We're just plugging away, man. This is really new to us because last year we launched so late, so we couldn't put a ton of football content out there. So we have lots of football content out there already. Yeah, no, I just appreciate you guys having me on, Joe. You're so smooth as a host.
I learned about watching you.
Up. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's nice to talk football with both of you guys. This is a great show. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and just thanks for having me.
I love you, Meaney. You're the best. All right, make sure you check out his work in the new Fantasy Black Book as well, out on Amazon right now. He does some fantastic team breakdowns in that. Great work as always. Buy Tags here, reminding everybody to make sure you hit up ipvanish.com. Use that promo code FantasyPros to get your 65% off. And don't forget to make it rain with the greatest sunglasses ever. Go to raen.com and use that code FantasyPros to get your coolest sunglasses ever. They really are. Honestly, the nicest sunglasses I have ever owned. Period. End of story. And that'll do it for us here on the show. But the story of the game goes on. For Tags and Meaney, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.